Okay, so we're now ready to get started on the border of Sonia's holiday. So you see how we've got all these loose ends. So the whole point of the envelope border, well, two reasons really. One is it looks really nice and adds a lovely weight to the finished blanket. And the other thing is so we don't have to weave in all these hundreds of ends. Okay, now what we'll need to do, I always like to just knot them together in sort of 2s or 3s, just to make it extra secure. Now, I prefer to do it now, before I actually get started on the border, but I know some people find it easier to keep these ends out of the way, but keeping them long. So it's entirely up to you what you do, but before you seal that border, I always recommend we just tie them together. So what I'm going to do, I'll do them in 3s, because it's obviously going to take me less time to tie 3 together all the way along the edge of a blanket than 2 together. So just want to grab 2 or 3 of the ends and then just tie a knot in. Now make sure you don't pull this knot too close to your blanket. If you pull it really tight, you bunch things up and you might find it a little harder to get into your chain. So I'll usually do it something like that, maybe a little bit closer but not much. Okay, so tying them together now, we're just making sure that we're totally confident that nothing's going to come undone inside that border. Okay, so go along the edge, tying them together like so, and then once you've done that, where are my scissors? You're going to need your scissors to just trim them so they are about just over 1 inch, like so, 3 centimeters or so, like so, like so. Don't cut them too close to the knots, because then that'll probably just come undone. That will defeat the object. Okay, so once you've done all that and you've got a big pile of stitch markers ready and your smaller hook, so what I recommend usually for the border is 1/2 millimeter smaller than the one that you use for the blanket. So I've actually been using a 3.75 millimeter hook for my blanket, so I've got a 3.25 here. The reason for using a smaller hook is just to make it a little bit firmer, and just so it's better to have your border ever so slightly sort of firmer and tighter than the main bit of your blanket. That just helps to give that lovely neat flat edge. Okay, so sort out your ends, come back and we'll get started on our border. You can actually start in any corner you like, but for the purpose of writing the pattern I had to pick one, just to make sense of whether I'm telling you how to work along the top or bottom or one of the sides. So in the pattern I've suggested you start right at the top, so right at the end of the last row that you would have done on your main blanket. So that's where I am here. And what we're going to do, we're now going to be working our border. We're going to be starting off working down this edge, and if you have a little look there, hopefully you can see, here we are, we've got these chains here, so that is what we're going to be working into when we start our border. So to get started, we're going to be doing a standing double crochet, and we're working into the front loop of this last chain at the top here, there, okay? So if I'm working in the round and doing a standing stitch, I don't usually personally like to put a knot on my hook for that, because I just think it makes it a little bit less tidy when you get to the end. So I will usually do it. I don't know if you can remember right back to when we first got started with that initial chain right at the start. Again, I didn't put a slip knot in that one either. So what I just do, get that out of the way so you can get the camera back round, I'll normally just twist that round like so. Okay, so you've got like a loop on your hook without a knot at the end. Then if you pick up your blanket, and as I said, we're just going to work just into that front loop. It's very important that you just work into the front loop, not into any chain spaces or under both loops, because with an envelope border we're actually working 2 borders. So we're going to be starting on the right side here, and then we'll do a separate border on the back, and then we join them together at the end. So you'll need the other loop when you come to do the back border. Okay, so standing double crochet in there, then just 1 chain and another standing crochet. So that's how we do our corners: double crochet, chain, double crochet. Okay, so as you can probably see if you look at that, it's very difficult to actually see just from looking at it which one's the chain and which one's a stitch. So to make that clearer, we're going to be grabbing a marker going to be using lots of markers for this border. I'm just going to pop that into that front loop of that chain there. Okay, and we're going to do that on every corner. So every time we do a corner, it'll be double crochet, chain, double crochet, and then pop that marker in that corner so you know where that chain is for the next round. Okay, and then as I think I mentioned a little while ago, all we're now going to do all the way down this edge is we're going to work double crochets just into the front loop of these chains. Okay, so that's it. All the way along like so. Okay, so carry on all the way down like that, and then come back to me when you get right down to the bottom edge of your blanket. Oh, another little tip actually before I go, can you see what I'm actually doing? In case you're wondering how to do it, you're going to be basically alternating different colours on each row, okay? Because when we did our pattern, we generally had like the main colour and then a contrast. Okay, so that's how you'll be able to be sure you haven't missed any. So right, I'll carry on and I'll see you when you get down to the next corner. Okay, so I've now got down to the next corner, so I'm now on the bottom edge of my blanket. So like we did when we started, remember we worked into the front loop of that last chain on that top row. We're now going to basically work into the front loop here of this first chain on the bottom. Okay, and we'll do our corner as they all are, one double crochet, one chain, one double crochet, and then I'm going to pop a marker in there. What I'm going to do, you can probably see from my tub here, I've got lots of different coloured markers in my tub. So I'm going to try and keep the same colour for the corner chains, because when we've done this round, I'm going to be showing you where to put some other markers, and it's quite good to be able to keep them in like a different colour or a different type of marker to the ones that you use for the corners, just to make things really, really obvious. Okay, so that's the corner done there, and now what we're going to do along the bottom here is just work into this front loop. Okay, because as I said before, the back loop's going to be needed when we do border 2 on the wrong side. So now just work all the way along just into that front loop of the chains at the bottom here, and I'll see you when you get to the last chain again. Okay, so I'm now halfway round one of my border, and I've just got one more stitch. See, one more stitch there to do before I get to that last chain on the bottom. Okay, now we've got that last chain. So as always, one double crochet, one chain, one double crochet, and then pop a marker in there. Okay, so for the rest of the round, we're just going to basically repeat what we've just done. So we're now going to go up this edge again, working into the chains. Now they look a little bit different at this end of the row. Maybe not quite so easy to see where the actual chains are, just because of the sort of the way the stitches work. If you give it a little stretch out, there we go, should be able to see. Can you see there? Sort of that. There's the front loops of the chains there. So just kind of carry on like where the top loops are for the stitches in the row. So you'll just now need to go all the way up this edge, just in the same way as you did on that first edge. Then remember to do your double crochet, chain, double crochet in that sort of first chain space at the top, and then work a row of double crochets into the front loop along the top edge. Yeah, so then when you get back, or when you get round to the end of there, which is obviously back to where you started, come back to me and I'll talk you through how we get started on, oh well, actually what we've got to do before we can get started on the next round. Okay, so I've now just got one more stitch to do before I get to the end of my round one here. So just done that. And now what we need to do is join up with our first stitch. Now if this is going to be the only round I did in this colour, I would now do an invisible join here. But we're going to be using this colour again. Not in the next row, but the one after. So I'm going to leave it attached and we'll just do a slip stitch into our first standing double crochet there. So where, I haven't got a knot on mine, but that's fine. We'll weave this end in at the end. So you do that slip stitch there, but make sure you don't pull it too tight, because you see that loop we just created there? That is actually where we're going to be working the last stitch of the next round. So what I'm going to do to make that clear is get another marker, just pop that in that slip stitch. So we now know where we're going to be making the last stitch of round 2. Okay, so I'm going to do, so before we can carry on, we need to decide where we are going to be placing our fairy lights. So I'm going to just pull that loop nice and big so that doesn't all unravel. What we now need to do, we're going to be starting. Now it's important to start at, or put the markers at the right place in the corners, because assuming that you have done a stitch into every single stitch on here, you will then be able to use certain multiples and have evenly spaced lights at the top and bottom of your blanket. Okay, so basically that's going to be a multiple that fits into the 48 stitch repeat. I'll explain a little bit clearer in a minute. But to do that, we just need to make sure that our lights in the corners are in the right place, because that's where we're going to start counting from. So if you look at the pattern, it tells you to place a marker in the second stitch before and after each marked corner chain. Okay, so this is our marked corner chain. So what we're going to do, different colour markers. Okay, so this is the first stitch, so corner chain, first stitch, second stitch. So you've got one clear stitch between your corner chain and the one we're now putting in for our first light there. Okay, so there's the one in between. Now on this, it'll be easier on the other corners and I will show you in there, but for this one, remember, this is the one we've just put the marker in at the end. That slip stitch is that single stitch between our marked corner chain and there. So we're now going to put yet another marker. It does get a little bit full of markers, but they really do help. So this is now the second stitch there. Okay. Okay. So that's that. So we now need to basically do the same thing on each corner, except on the others you won't have this one. Okay, so if I now go to this end here, it'll be a little bit easier because we haven't got our extra marker there for that slip stitch. So, oops, grab hold of them. So we're going to need one clear space, and then there, and the same the other way. So there's our corner chain, there's one clear stitch, and then we're going to do that there. So you need to now go ahead and do the same thing on the other two corners as well, and then come back and I'll take you through how we actually decide where we're going to be putting our lights around the rest of the border. Okay, so now it's totally optional where you put your lights around the edge. Now you can just do like we've got here, just a couple of little ones in the corner. You could have your lights evenly spaced all the way around, just in some corners, do something sort of well, however you like. But what we now need to do is to mark where we want the center of each of our lights. Now, as a tip, I think I mentioned a minute ago that if you want all of your lights evenly spaced on the top and bottom edges, if you leave either 7, 11, 15, 23 or indeed 47 stitches between your markers, so like between, this will be like where the little cord bits for each light are, if you do that you should find that they will work out exactly on the top and bottom edges. Now on the sides is a different matter, because especially if you've added extra patterns or you've used slightly different colours, you could have your row count will be slightly different, potentially. So what we're going to do is just play around with some markers. So to do that, what I'm doing, the reason I say 7 is the minimum, if you leave 7 spaces between your markers here, that will actually end up meaning that you've just got the 3 stitches between each light round the edge, and I don't think you really want them any closer than that. For a reference point, Hayley on her traditional blanket and Caroline on her deco one, they both left 11 stitches between the markers here. What I'm going to do, I'm actually going to do my lights all the way around, and I'm going to leave 15 stitches between mine, so my lights will be just a little bit more spread out. Okay, so we've got the marker there, so I'm now just going to count 15 clear stitches. Get a marker ready. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15. So if I can get hold of it, my marker goes there, and I am just going to check I've got 15 between there. Okay, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15. Brilliant. And then do the same again. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15. Marker goes in there. Now for the side edges, if you do want them even, what I suggest you do is do maybe 4 or 5 like this from the bottom, then back down from the top, and then you'll sort of do 1 each end, because if there is any adjustment, then it'll look nicer if you keep that adjustment in the middle. Does that make sense? So do 1 more here. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15. Marker goes in there. I don't know if you can hear the rain there. My little studio here is actually got a flat roof, and it's raining quite heavily out there, so I can hear it really quite loudly on the roof. Hopefully you can still hear me okay. So what I'm then going to do, I'll do the same at the other end, and then I'll come back in a moment and we'll talk through the middle bit. Okay, so I have now gone ahead and I've now got, say, from the top edge, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more markers, all with 15 stitches between. And I've done the same, there we are, up from the bottom edge on this side. And what that has left me, and I've counted them up, there's 20 stitches I've now got, 40 stitches I've now got between those 2 markers. So now we've got a bit of a choice. We've been leaving 15 stitches between, and obviously I can't do that and get them to fit exactly. So you can either carry on counting your 15 down from that end and up from that end and just have a small gap between the middle lights, or what I'm probably going to do is to actually count up. And I won't go exactly, because if I'm just going to put 1 in the middle, I'm going to have 19 spare stitches one side and 20 the other. So we'll just have a little count up from one direction or the other and work out where we want to put that to make it look nicer with the pattern, if that makes sense. Okay, so 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. So 20 takes us right there in the middle of that, just where the little sort of knocker things for the bells are. So I actually think that's quite a nice stitch to put it in. So that'll mean I have now got 19 stitches here and 20 there. No one's really going to notice that when you come round. I mean, if you want, you can always bring a couple of these in a little bit more, so that's a little bit more evenly spaced, however you want. But basically, as long as you've got at least 7 clear stitches between markers, then you should be all right. Okay, so I've done that on this side. Now I'm going to do on exactly the same on the opposite edge, and when we then come to that middle one, what we'll do then, we can then just make sure our odd stitch lines up here. Okay, so we've gone through the side edges. I'll just show you along the top here, and I'm hoping that I got my stitch counts correctly, but hopefully if we keep counting 15 stitches between here, it should find that they spread out, they spaced out perfectly. Okay, So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15, and one in there. And again, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15, and one in there. So carry on like so. I'll come back in a moment. Okay, I have finished putting all the markers in around my blanket now, including down the other edge. And I was right, this actually worked out absolutely perfectly at the top edge here. So what we're now going to do, I'm going to leave all these markers where they are. The only ones we're going to be moving up on this next round are the ones we're working into the corner chains, and of course this one when we get to the end. All right, but all the others, just leave them where they are. So that's why, I probably should have said it before, hopefully you noticed that I've just put them in the front loop there, because we're now going to be working into the back loops of all the stitches around. Okay, so we're going to leave the colour, this colour here, sort of the cords of our fairy lights, going to leave that where it is. We're now just going to pick up our main colour, and to join that we're literally just pulling that loop through there. So when I say pull up loop, that's all I mean, just literally pull the loop through in the new colour in the stitch where you are. Okay, make sure you don't leave this end too short, you will need to weave it in at the end. Okay, so to start the next round we are going to do a chain. Now this first chain is just like a turning chain, it's just to get our hook up to the level where it needs to be. Okay, so that doesn't count as a stitch. And then we're going to be working into this, so we can see we've got our marked corner chain. Just going to work into the back of that. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go over in this corner, just go over this sort of loose end there, just to hold it in position, but as I said, you will still need to weave it in. So we've got 1 double crochet, 1 chain, 1 double crochet, all into that marked corner chain. Then we take this marker out and we pop it into the front loop of that corner chain on that round, so where we've just done it. So now for the rest of this round, as I said, we're leaving these markers where they are, and we are just going to be working around double crochets. Okay, so double crochets into those back loops of those stitches. So you're going to go all the way around like so until you get to the corner. So when you get to those marked corner chains, remember that's where you're going to be doing 1 double crochet, 1 chain, 1 double crochet, and moving your marker up. But all the rest of the way around you're leaving the other markers where they are. Right, so I've now got round to the end of round 2, and you can see I've got quite a cluster of markers in this corner. But so to break it down, remember the green one is what I've been using to mark the corner chains, so that's fine. That's the corner chain right at the start of our round 2. Then the red ones were the ones that we put in place for the lights nearest the corners, so that's fine. And I've now just got to the other marker. There's only the one in this yellow colour here, which is the one in the slip stitch at the end of round 1. So what I'm now going to do, might take the last stitch of round 2 is going to be made into there. Okay, and now, so we can take that out because we've used that. We're now going to need it again in a second, because now I've done that, we're now gonna, there we go, we've got a slip stitch into that first double crochet. Okay, and again, like we did at the end of round 1, don't pull that too tight. There we are, and then we're going to pop the marker back in there. So the last stitch from round 3 will be made into there. Okay, so now what we're going to do, we're going to drop our main colour. We're going to pick up our colour for the lights, the strings for the lights again. And just like we did when we joined our main colour, we're just going to pull this loop. So pull the loop through there, pull that down. Okay, so we've done that, that's all nice and secure like so. and then our turning chain. Okay, so now we're going to start the round exactly the same as we started round 2, working into the back of this corner chain with our 1 double crochet, 1 chain, 1 double crochet, and then we're going to move this marker up. Okay, so we're still making sure we're always marking the corner chains. So now we start down here, so we've got 2 more back loop double crochets, 1, 2, and as you can see, that's now brought us up to that first marker after the corner. So our next stitch is going to be a front loop treble into that marked stitch there. Okay, so all we do now is we're going to carry on around working back loop double crochets until we get to the markers when we will be doing our front loop trebles. So if you've kept them all evenly spaced, so if you remember on the first round, apart from just those bits just right in the middle of the sides, the left and right sides of my blanket, apart from that, all of mine, I had 15 stitches between the markers. So what I should now be doing is, so make sure you, as always, you miss the stitch behind your treble. So what I should now find, if I do 15 here, that will then take me up to the next marker. But if your markers are spaced differently, or indeed they're not all evenly spaced and you've dotted them around a bit, that's fine. Just carry on working your back loop double crochets until you get to that stitch basically before the next marker. Right, so I'm now, there we go, I've now got to up to the next marker, so it's a front loop treble in there, and then we start again with our back loop crochets. So yeah, just carry on like so, remembering that when you get to the corners you'll still be doing your double crochet, chain, double crochet, and then just moving that marker up into that chain. Okay, so we've always got our marked corner chains, and then so in between it's all back loop double crochets apart from where you've got the markers for the middle of the lights. Okay, I've just come back at the first corner just to sort of run through the instructions there. So I've now got to that last marked stitch, and we'll still do our front loop treble in there, and then a good double check. You'll notice you should have now space for 2 more back loop double crochets before you get to that marked corner chain. So then, as I've said, in the corners, 1 double crochet, 1 chain, 1 double crochet, and move the marker up. And what we can now do is move all these markers up as well. So you can see I've sort of done that there. So move them up on the contrast colour rounds. If you do it in between, then it gets a little bit awkward with like working in front of it. Okay, so yeah, carry on around like so. I mean, if you feel that you don't actually now need the markers, because you can see that they are all going to be in the middle of our lights. So you'll always, if you can follow up from the centre here of the lights and just sort of read that as if they are marked, then you can get rid of them or carry on and move them up. Right, carry on around, and I'll see you at the end of round 3, ready to do round 4. Right, now got round to the very last F, the front loop, last front loop treble, at the end of round 3. So that means we've now got 2 more back loop double crochets to do. So 1 in there, and the last one will be in that marked slip stitch at the end of round 2. Okay, so I'll now take out that marker that was marking that, and then we're just going to slip stitch right into this first double crochet there in that corner, and again, as always, don't pull it too tight, and pop that marker back in. Okay, so now we have finished with our CC2, the colour for the sort of the cord for the lights. So what we can do is just chop that off like so. So make sure you leave a long enough bit to weave in at the end or tie up with the other bits. But that's that colour finished with. So now we go back to our main colour for round 4. Okay, so now to start round 4, we're going to pull up a loop through there again. So just as before, that's how you change your colours. Okay, so then we have our turning chain, and then in the back, so where we've got this marked corner chain, remember, we're going to be working into the back of that, and I'm just going to work over this end like we did when we, remember when we joined our main colour down there, we just for the first couple of stitches just worked over that end. Okay, so I'll just hold it secure until we make it properly secure at the end. So we've got 1 double crochet, 1 chain, oops, 1 double crochet, all into that corner chain. Move the marker up into the chain again. Okay, so for round 4, so again we're going to be leaving our markers where they are because we're working into them again on the next row, so don't bother to move them up as you make this round. So what we've now got is 1 back loop double crochet and then 1 front loop treble. So where that's going to go, you can see straight down there. Okay, so 1 front loop treble, then we've got a back loop double crochet, and that now takes us up to our marked stitch, and so we're going to do another back loop double crochet into that marked stitch and 1 more in the next one. Okay, so now what we're going to do, so we've got basically a little cluster there of 3 back loop double crochets with our marked stitch is the middle one. Okay, so we're now going to we'll do our front loop trebles until we get to the stitch before the marker, so when we've got 1 stitch left before we get to our marked stitch. Okay, so 1, 2, 12, 13. So obviously if you are doing your lights spaced differently, then you'll have a different number of trebles in there. But we've now got, so I've got 1 stitch left before the marked stitch, and then it's double crochet, then another double crochet into the marked stitch, and then another one. Okay, and then we're back to doing our trebles again until we get to 1 stitch before the marked stitch. So carry on around like that. I will just see you when we get to this first corner there, just so I can run through what you do in the corners again. Right, so I've now got down to the last sort of marker on this first side, so obviously 1 stitch before, and as we've been doing all along, it'll be a back loop double crochet there, then 1 in the marked stitch and 1 after, and that then takes us to just 2 stitches left before our marked corner chain. So in those 2 stitches we are going to, you can see, just follow down where that goes. You've got your front loop treble there, so that's right next to the corner chain on round 2, then a back loop double crochet immediately before the corner chain, then the usual double crochet chain, double crochet into that marked chain, and move the marker up again. Okay, so now we're going to start again. So we've got one back loop double crochet and then one front loop treble, and then we've got the 3 back loop double crochets there with our marked stitch is the middle one. Okay, then you start with your run of trebles. So you can now carry on around, finish this round, and I'll see you when you get to the end of it, and we'll then get started on round 5 together. Okay, so I've now got to that last, or the stitch before that last marker for the lights on round 4. So we're gonna obviously do our 3 back loop double crochets there, as we've been doing all the way along, and then we've got 1 front loop treble in there, and then as always we've got to remember to end with another back loop double crochet, there we go, in the back loop of that marked slip stitch from the end of round 3. Okay, so I'll take that out now, and also as always we are going to be joining it up with a slip stitch in that first double crochet and then putting our marker back into that slip stitch. Okay, so that is round 4 done, and for round 5 we're now going to start using the colour for our lights, or contrast colour 3. So same as we always do when we're either changing colour from below or adding a new one, we're just going to leave a reasonable size end so you can weave it in at the end, or knot them together, pull it through there, pull that one down, and then say every corner, every round is going to start the same. We've got our turning chain, and then whoops, into the back loop of that marked corner chain. Oh, fingers and thumbs today. And I'm just going to work over the end as well. We just got our double crochet, chain, double crochet, and move the marker up. Okay, so now working down the edge again, we've got 3 back loop double crochets, 1, 2, 3, and that now takes us to our little sort of space where we've got the 3 back loop double crochets on the previous round. Okay, so that's now 1 stitch before our marked stitch. Okay, so we've now, this time we're now going to be working front loop trebles in these stitches. So 1 before the marker, 1 in the marked stitch, and then another. Okay, and then what we'll do, we'll now move our markers up again. Okay, so that's what you'll do for each light as you go around. If you feel that you don't need the markers, you just kind of know that, read the marker as that middle stitch, that's fine, you can ditch them, but I'll just keep using them there. Kind of makes sense of the pattern, it's also easier to see. Okay, so now it's just a case of working back loop double crochets all the way along here where we had trebles before. Nothing else you can do. And then when we get to the next, not much point me going through all that, when we then get to this next group here, we'll be doing trebles. So you'll be basically working around, apart from the corners where it's sort of slightly different, but you'll be working around, working your double crochets, back loop double crochets wherever you had a treble before, and then trebles where you had your back loop double crochets. Right, I've now got down to this corner and just done the last 3 front loop trebles into that last little space there. So we're now just to end this edge, and indeed every edge, with 3 back loop double crochets. Then it's our standard corner, which is 1 double crochet, 1 chain, 1 double crochet all into that marked chain, and then of course we move our marker up. Okay, then we're going to start again with 3 back loop double crochets, and then our 3 trebles in there. So you should now be able to get round the rest of round 5 here, and then I will see you and just get you, oh, what am I doing, put in the wrong place, on that in the next stitch, and then you double crochet. So yeah, carry on around, and then I'll see you to get you started on round 6. Right, so I'm now almost to the end of round 6. So I've just got this last 3 back loop double crochets to do there. So as always, the last one goes into that marked slip stitch, and then take that out and slip stitch into the first double crochet of the round again. Don't pull it too tight, and pop that marker back in. If you can get your fingers to work, that is. Marvellous. Right, so now we're going to be needing our CC3 again, so we're not cutting it, we're just going to drop that and leave it at the back, then pick up our main colour again, pull it through, turning chain, and then every round starts the same, where we go straight into double crochet, chain, double crochet into that corner chain, and move the marker up into that space. So now on this round we're going to start with a back loop double crochet, and then we've got 2 front loop trebles, 1, 2, then there's 2 back loop double crochets before we now get to our marked center stitch. So that's, remember, the center stitch of each line is our marked stitch, so we're going to do double crochet in there, and then 2 more. So now we've got a little sort of run of 5 double crochets centered across that light, and now we are going to be doing front loop trebles right up until there's the 2 stitches left before the marker again. Okay, so front loop trebles until you get to 2 stitches before the next marker, and then you'll have that run of 5 back loop double crochets. So at the corner you'll have your 2 trebles, then 1 double crochet before the double crochet chain, double crochet in the corner. So I don't think I need to really show you anymore. I think you're going to be fine now. You've got all of the information you need really to enable you to complete the border. Okay, so just now got 1 more stitch left to do, and I will have completed border 1, so the front border on my blanket. So that is obviously that last stitch there, last double crochet into that back loop there of that slip stitch, and now we can ditch that marker. Okay, so rather than joining with a slip stitch at the end of this round, to make it neater and also to make it easier when you come to join the 2 borders together, we're going to just join this with an invisible join. So if you don't know how to do that, I'll just take you through that now. So take my hook out of there. I'm going to cut this off, leave probably at least sort of 4 to 6 inches. You need enough to work with and to like tidy up the end. So now we've done that, I'm just going to pull that through. Okay, so now you've just got the one strand of yarn sticking out of that last loop of that last stitch. So pick up your tapestry needle, and I'm going to thread that onto there. Making a mess of that. There we go. Threaded that onto there. So now what we're going to do, when we've been slip stitching at the end of each round, we've been working into these loops here. We're not going to do that for this one. We're actually going to be working here right next to our marker. Now the reason for that is this loop we're now making is going to basically replace this first loop there. Okay, so we don't pull it tight. The idea is you leave that, can you see there? So basically we're now going to go back into this initial, you can see where the yarn came out, and also down through this like extra little bump at the back there. Okay, then pull that down, and as I say, just pull it tight enough so it disappears and looks like all of the other stitches. Okay, so that's it, we've gone past that. We're replacing that top loop of that first stitch with our invisible join. So now you've done that, just want to tidy it up at the back, and what we can do, I'm just going to tuck that. Make sure you don't go all the way through, because you don't want to see anything there. As we've already got an end here, what I'm actually going to do, because this is all going to be hidden in the border, just going to tie these two ends together. If it was visible, you'd have to sort of tidy it up probably. Don't pull these too tight, because we don't want to bunch anything up. Okay, so I'll tie it there like 3 times, nice and secure. Okay, so now what we're going to do is chop them off to about 1 inch, like we have the rest of it. And then if we go down here again, we've got 2 ends quite close together there, tie those together, and here. Now if you didn't have 2 ends so close together, then you may want to weave them, and you may want to weave them in anyway. There we go, 3 knots there, they aren't going anywhere. So I'll just trim them roughly like so. Okay, so that is our first border done. So now if you notice, I've taken out all of the other markers apart from these ones in the corner chains. We need to leave them there, because we still need to know where our corner chains are when we've completed our border 2, so we can join them together. Okay, so once you've got to this point and tidied up, if you had to join any yarn anywhere else, just make sure you've tidied up those ends in the same way, and then come back and we will do border 2 together. Okay, so for border 2, I'll turn my blanket over. It doesn't really matter which corner you start in, but what I tend to do, just to make sense of the written instructions, is I usually start mine in like either of the corners where the first thing you're going to do is work down an edge. So I'm actually now at the bottom edge of my blanket on the wrong side. You can see I've got the same hook as I was just using. I've also got 4 more markers for the corner chains, and then 1 in a different colour for the slip stitch at the end of each round. Okay, so for the colours on the back, we're just basically going to be doing 12 plain rows or rounds of back loop double crochets. So this is an ideal job once you get going, an ideal job for sitting in front of the TV in the evening. I think it's nice and easy. Okay, now colour wise, you can use any colours that you've got left. So you should have a fair bit of sort of most of your colours left. So and you're going to need roughly, if you're my gauge and you're using the special DK, you're going to need roughly, I think, sort of 12 grams for each round. So that should help you decide which colours you're using where. Now I'm going to start, and I usually do, not always, but I usually like to start with the same colour we started border 1 with. Now the only reason for doing that is if you slip up and you manage to sort of put your hook all the way through to the other side. If you are using the same colour as you did before, any little bits of yarn that show through there would be very difficult to see because they'll be the same colour. Okay, but you can use whatever colours you want and do whatever kind of design of stripes or whatever you want from what you've got left. So to get started, as we did on the front, we're going to be starting with a standing double crochet. And as I did before, because I'm working in the round, I'm not going to now put a slip knot on my hook. I am just going to twist the yarn around like so. So make sure you leave a long enough end to sort of tidy it up at the end. Okay, right, so now if we pick up our work, you can see here where all of the stitches were made. Hopefully you can. All of the stitches were made in the corner before. So what we're now going to do is work into the front of that chain there. So that's obviously the front as you're looking at it, and do the same. So 1 double crochet, 1 chain, 1 double crochet, all in there. Okay, and then as we did for border 1, we're going to pick up a marker and we're going to just pop that into that front loop there of that corner chain. Okay, then turn around. I'm going to work all the way down the side here again, just as we did before, working our double crochets into the front loops of these chains. Now it might be slightly more difficult to see the chains on the back because you've already worked into them once on the front, but if you give, hopefully, if you can see there, if you give that all a stretch, you should be able to see where the chains are. Okay, so there you go, into there. All right, and again, there we go. Ooh. I think I didn't get all the strands there. Okay, so carry on like so. Remember, apart from right at the top and the bottom where you may have an extra one in the same colour, you're generally going to be doing a different, working into a different colour chain each time. Okay. Okay, so I'm now almost to the next corner. I've just got another 1 stitch to pick up there, and that's now going to take me, oops, right up to this next corner. So, sorry, I apologize for all the knots there, but hopefully you can see there that this is the chain where we worked our corner in on the other side. So now just gonna double crochet, chain, double crochet into there we go, and pop our marker in that chain. Okay, so actually if you see what I just did there, if you now fold this down, you should get a good view of the last remaining, yeah, I've got 1 more loop left from our sort of the chains or the stitches at the top of our blanket. This is, it would also look very similar at the bottom. So you just got the 1 to work into. So actually if we fold that over there, you can now see quite clearly, you can just go along here working a row of double crochets nice and easy into that last remaining loop. So yeah, that's it. At the top and bottom you're just going to be working into these front loops. That should be the last available loop of those stitches, and then obviously into the chains up the sides. 1 double crochet, 1 chain, 1 double crochet into those chains at the start and end of the sort of first and last rows of the blanket. So you carry on around like that. Okay, so I'm now almost all the way around the first round of border 2. Just got 3 more stitches here to pick up. So just working as I have been all along into these last remaining loops there. Fabulous. So now, just as we did on border 1, we're going to join with a slip stitch into that standing double crochet. See, underneath the 2 loops there of that standing double crochet, pick that up and pull it through again. And again, just as we did on border 1, we are going to pop our marker into that slip stitch. So now we know where we're going to be working the last stitch of the round. So on the front, I showed you how to pick up a new colour, and it'll be the same here. If you want to now change colours for the next row, you'll do it in exactly the same way as we did on border 1, which is to literally just, oh, where's the end, to just pull that new colour through there. If you finished with this colour, you can cut it off. If not, you can hold it on there till you pick it up on another row. So you do that, then do your turning chain and start on your new colour. But what we didn't do, I'm not going to do that here, because I want to just show you what you do if you aren't changing colour. Again, there we go. So if you're not changing colour, you obviously don't need to pull another one through. You can go straight into doing your turning chain. Okay, and now we're going to be starting in just like we did before. You're just going to start the next round with a double crochet, chain, double crochet into that first marked corner chain, and then, as we said before, you just pick that out of there and put it back into the chain there. So that's basically all you now need to know to complete border 2. So say changing colour how you wish, and now we're just going to do rounds of back loop double crochets. So all the way around you'll be doing double crochets into the back loops, and then when you get to the corner chains, just remember it's 1 double crochet, 1 chain, 1 double crochet there, and just move your marker up into the chain, and that's that. So carry on around, and when you have done a total of 12 rounds on the back, you should find border 2 is the same size as border 1. So when you get to that point, you'll come back and then I'll show you how we join the 2 together. Okay, so I've now finished my back border. I'm just using up sort of scraps of whatever yarn I had left over. Just cut off the yarn at the end of that last row, at the last round, but I haven't fastened it off yet. So because we're going to do exactly the same as we did on the front, just an invisible join. So I'm pulling that out there, and apologies for using such a dark colour where it may not be quite so easy to show you what I'm doing, but hopefully you can remember from the front anyway. I will just run through one more time how to do the invisible join though. So thread your end through a tapestry needle. Okay, so you can see you just got the 1 strand hopefully sticking out of that last stitch. So as before, we don't go into this stitch, which is where we've been making our slip stitches at the end of each round. Actually, we don't need this one anymore. That was just showing you that last stitch was made into that slip stitch. That was the one I was marking the slip stitches with. Right, there we go. It's easier now. So we're not going into there. I'm going to put our needle right next to our corner chain marker. Okay. And then make sure you don't pull it too tight. Then go back into the middle of that stitch exactly where it came out, and back down through that sort of 3rd loop there at the back as well. Okay, and don't pull it too tight. So now that's why it's an invisible join. It's invisible. So I've already gone down and tidied up my other ends from creating that border. So for this one we'll just have to weave it in. So nice and easy. Just come down a few rows, indeed round. Again, make sure you don't pull it too tight because you don't want to bunch up what you've just done on the front. And then what I'll tend to do is just come sort of loop round that last stitch there, do a few more that way, and then just come back the other way again. Okay, and then chop that off. Fabulous. So that's that. So this is where you can just about see, if you look closely, where we've joined, but I think it looks pretty neat. Okay, so now we've done that, we need to join both of these borders together. So what I'm going to do is going to actually choose a different corner now. There we go. So we've got the right side facing me again. So I'm now back on the front of my blanket. So this is just one where I haven't done any sort of bits and pieces in the corner before. Oh, if you want to see, there we go, that's what the other corners look like. Okay, so we've still got our markers in the corner chains because we're now going to be starting in any corner. It doesn't matter which corner you start in, we're going to be starting in those corner chains. Okay, so grab your main colour, and we are working all the way around it. So I'm not going to start with a slip knot again. I'm just going to twist the yarn around as I've been doing when we've gone in the round and also on our very starting chain. Okay, so then it's simply, so you can see where you've got your corner mark there. I'm going to go into like the back loop there, and it would have been the back loop as we worked it on the back, but it's like the front one we can see now, if that makes sense. Okay, so we've picked up our first stitch, just the back loop, and we're going to do the same on that marked corner chain. Okay, so they're basically the inner loops, and then we start there with our standing double crochet, and then because it's a corner, we're going to do 2 more. So in those marked corner chains we are going to be working 3 back loop double crochets. Okay, so now we can actually get these markers out of the way, we're not going to need them anymore. Okay, so now all we're going to do to join, we're going to carry on around just picking up those inner loops, so the back loop there, and what was the back loop when you made it there, double crochet. Okay, so you're going to do that all the way around, and as I said, when you get to the marked corner chains, remember it's just 3 double crochets into them. All right, so what I will do, I'll come back when we get to the next corner. If all being well, if you haven't sort of gained or missed any stitches on either of your borders, we should get to the next corner in exactly the same place on both borders. Okay, so that's the front, and the back is going to look like that. Right, so I've now just got to this first corner, and very pleased to see that I have just the 1 stitch remaining on both the front and the back borders, so no need to fudge anything. If you did find that maybe you got to the border 1 stitch earlier on one side than the other, then what I would tend to do is make sure you basically keep the front looking right. So you just pretend this other stitch isn't there. I'll show you what I mean. So say the back was now, we didn't have this extra stitch here, so you would then on the front you'd still work into like the corner chain, which would be the next stitch on the back there. So the front is still in the stitch it should be, the back would then be in that corner, and then you'd basically, when you get to the corner, then work your 3 stitches all into that same corner chain. Does that make sense? So then by the time you start again the other way, it's all correct. Hope that makes sense and I didn't confuse you completely. But as I didn't actually get there too early, I'm actually going to complete mine as it should be done. So there we are, still doing the inner loops. And then in the next one, the corner chains, then we remember we've just got to work off three double crochets there. It might be easier to actually take that out first. There we go, and see the chain a bit easier now. Get all strands, there we go. And I hope I'm not covering that up with my fingers. There we go. So we're going to do 3 double crochets into that corner chain. And then turn around and work our way down this edge. Okay. So you can carry on around like so. And I'll see you when you get to the end of the round. Okay, so I've now got right the way around my blanket and finished joining it. Doesn't it look pretty? Okay, so what I've done, I've actually cut the yarn. And so now what we need to do is just like we've done at the end of like the front border and the back border, we need to do our invisible join. But obviously this time we're just going to have to be a little bit neater on the back because you're going to see the ends this time, aren't you? They're not going to be hidden inside anything. Right, so pull that through there just like before. So we've now just got that one strand of yarn sticking out of the middle of that stitch. Thread it onto my tapestry needle, and then we can pull this end. This is the original starting end, so there's no actual slip knot on there. We'll just pull that reasonably tight, tuck that out of the way for now. So we're not gonna, I say, if we were doing a slip stitch, remember we would have worked into that stitch, which I just pulled tight, but we're not going to now. We're actually going to be replacing the top of that. So we're inserting our needle there. Remember, don't pull it too tight because you want to keep this loop that we're now creating looking just like all the others. Okay, so now we're going to go back into the middle there and then down through that third loop as well. Okay, so there we go, just pull it so it looks just like all of the other stitches. And then we just got to, as I said, we now just need to weave these ends in, make it look nice and neat. Get that one out of the way for now. So what I'm going to do is just go back along here a few stitches. Remember not again to pull it too tight, you just want to do that. Then I'll probably just wrap it around there. Oh, it's slipping. Trying to show you what I'm doing. Under a few stitches like so, and then we'll just come back the other way. There we go, like that. And then if you just pull it a little bit tighter as you cut, that end has now disappeared in there. So you just need to do the same with this end and then you're all done.